Good morning. Still morning. Hey, the first duty of our government is to keep the American people safe. That's why today the House will vote on a plan to pause our Syrian refugee program. If our law enforcement and intelligence community cannot verify that each and every person coming here is not a security threat, then they shouldn't be allowed in. Right now, the government can't certify these standards, so this plan pauses the program. It's a security test, not a religious test. This reflects our values. This reflects our responsibilities. And this is urgent. We cannot and should not wait to act, not when our national security is at stake. Often in times of crisis, bills like this come together sort of haphazardly. That's not the case here. The Homeland Security Committee has been looking at this issue all year long. It held hearings. It issued recommendations to deal with the very refugee problem we're talking about today. Right after the attacks, the majority leader put together a task force of relevant committee chairs to draw upon this work. We had an Intelligence Committee briefing of our members. We reached out to our Democratic colleagues. We didn't think of party labels when we mourned for France. We should do the same thing when protecting our country. This is an important first step, but we need to do more. Not just about the refugees, but in the fight against ISIS. The defense bill that we sent the president this week requires him to present a plan to defeat ISIS. In the meantime, our task force will continue the work on these grave challenges. This week, we also made significant progress in our efforts to return to regular order. 2 formal committee conferences have met. You know, I'm amazed at this. I kind of looked at the record, and I've been a chair of conferences, I've been on conference committees, but many of our members have never even experienced a conference committee because we've not had regular order around here for a long time. So this week we have 2 conference committees meeting, the Highway Conference and Education Conference. There were 6 executive sessions for our members to provide input on our appropriation bills. And House Republicans approved the first in a series of reforms to create a more open and inclusive process. All of this is about getting results for our country. It's easy to have an issue to talk about or a political football to toss around. The challenges we face and the people we serve demand more. With that, I'd be happy to take your questions.
Ryan, Democrats have been pushing a bill for years that would deny suspected terrorists on the government's no-fly list from being able to purchase a gun. It's something that was originally proposed by the Bush administration. You've said it's better to be safe than sorry. Is this something that you'd support?
This is the beginning of all this process. The task force is taking all suggestions from Democrats and Republicans. So as I mentioned, we are just beginning this process of reassessing all of our security stances so that we can make sure that we're keeping the American people safe. So the task force is in the process of going through regular order, through the committee process, of taking all suggestions by members of Congress and the public about how to keep our country safe.
To pass this bill in 2 days, how quickly would you consider something?
Let me explain why we passed this bill in 2 days, why we're passing this bill in 2 days. I want to read you a quote. First from Jay Johnson, Secretary of Homeland Security. It is true that we are not going to know a whole lot about the Syrians that come forth in this process. We know that organizations like ISIL might like to exploit this program. The bad news is that there is no risk-free process. How about FBI Director James Comey, under oath, testifying before Congress? There is risk associated with bringing anybody in from the outside, but especially from a conflict zone like Syria. My concern there is that there are certain gaps I don't want to talk about publicly in the data available to us. Our own law enforcement experts are telling us they don't have confidence that they can detect or block, with the current standards in place, that ISIL or ISIS is not trying to infiltrate the refugee population. This is an urgent matter, and that is why we're dealing with this urgently. There are many other issues that we need to consider, and we will do so under regular order.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Speaker, have you spoken recently to Senate Leader Mitch McConnell about the Syrian bill, and has he given any assurances that he can get this bill through his chamber and overcome
I've spoken with Mitch McConnell about this. We anticipate a bipartisan vote today. I'm not going to speak for the Senate what they will or will not do, but he's very familiar with what we're doing. Go ahead.
If the current refugee process takes about 1.5 to 2 years, supposedly, according to the administration, How much more time is this going to add, and does it really matter?
I don't think time is the issue, it's quality that's the issue. The issue, as our briefers tell us, is this is different because we don't really have a Syria to talk to. We don't have data on the other end to verify the veracity of a refugee's claims coming here. When we know that ISIL is already telling us that they are trying to infiltrate the refugee population, when we have indications that some of the Paris bombers, one at least, may have come through the refugee routes, don't you think that common sense dictates that we should take a pause and get this right? Our first priority here is the safety of the American people. And we do not have to pick among our values. We're a compassionate nation. These refugee laws are important laws. We're not talking about having a religious test. We're talking about a security